My dear friends, this is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with the 31 days of cop films and gangster films from the year 1970 to the present day. So that spans a wide expanse of years, but if it's okay with you, I'd like to focus first of all right now on the cop or police film genre, and I'd like to focus on a police film that is from the 1980s, around the mid 1980s, 1984. And in fact, it's not just one film, because ever since 1984, and this now first in a series of these films, and I'll mention them momentarily, we have seen a number of these films that have spanned over the course of around 10 years since that initial first film. And my goodness, what a film series this is. It is a comedy film series. It is very memorable, filled with a lot of great gags and jokes, some quote-unquote highbrow humor, some maybe a little bit lower in the brow range, so to speak, but all in all, it's all in good fun and good spirit, and it's all for the sake of laughs and comedy and entertainment, and yes, having a good time at the movies. So what films am I speaking about? I'm speaking of these films in this series, which is Police Academy. This happens to be a Blu-ray set that I was very fortunate to have been able to purchase. So Police Academy. So we're talking about the films which are Police Academy, Police Academy 2, Their First Assignment, Police Academy 3, Back in Training, Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol, Police Academy 5, Assignment Miami Beach, Police Academy 6, City Under Siege, and Police Academy Mission to Moscow, or Police Academy 7, Mission to Moscow. So there are, by my count, these 7 works. There are some other forms of the Police Academy series in other media, but let's focus in on the film series, as it were. And my goodness, what a memorable and fun film series this is. So for those who don't know what the Police Academy films are, these are a set of comedy films that are focusing in on a number of really very memorable characters that are through a certain set of, say, circumstances, depending on the film that we're talking about, are all somehow or another connected to this notion of training police officers at the police academy in question. And so that leads to various set of comic or humorous routines or scenarios or exchanges. So therein lies the ultimate conceit of these films. And that sets the stage for the introduction or the emergence of a number of really great characters that we get to meet across this really great series, beginning with the first one. Of course, there might be some films that have focusing on certain characters while seeing some characters conspicuously absent, but then they return to another film or something like that, or maybe certain characters are only present up to a certain point and then they no longer appear, or maybe most characters go up to, say, the 6th or 7th film or something like that. But all in all, there is a general, in the general sense, a type of consistency in the terms of the characters that we meet. So, for example, in this great set of films, we have Mahoney, Jones, Tackleberry, Callahan, and Hooks, and Hightower, and Harris, and Mauser, and Proctor, and many others, of course. So it's Zed and Sweet Chuck, and others. And so and as I say, they all come with their own set of character traits and quirks, and it seems like a bunch of mismatched, misfits, as it were, but they come together and there's an earnest charm about the proceedings. There's a type of innocent, playful fun. There is maybe a sense of a wide range of humor, some highbrow humor jokes, maybe some jokes on the lower end of the brow range, as it were. So some so-called potty humor, etc. But it's all in good fun. It's all in good fun. It's all meant to make people laugh and entertain. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about in terms of having a good time at the movies. And for me, being a fan of these films, Police Academy, I'm always having a good time with these films. I can say personally, from my own experience, these films were emerging primarily in the 80s, around the mid to late 80s. And I was born in 79, so I grew up in the 80s. So the Police Academy films were like foundational in terms of my VHS cinema days as a kid growing up. For instance, Police Academy 2 and Police Academy 3 got a lot of attention in terms of VHS rentals for me, and I enjoyed those immensely. And so there are some jokes there that are in my mind so kind of iconic. Again, I don't want to go into too much details, but there's, for example, in Police Academy 2, there's a really there's this character named Mauser, and there's a scene involving shampoo. And so that's one. It's very funny, but and I think about it. But and also Police Academy 3, there's some. Police Academy 3 Back in Training. That's one of my favorites. I love the setup in terms of the rival training schools, as it were, and the return to a type of police academy setting, which was kind of absent. We have, of course, those of you who know the Police Academy movies, you'll know that we had the first setup, the first film being the setup of the police academy setting, and then the second film kind of retreating from that, going out into actual service, as it were, away from the academy setting. But then for part 3, and indeed maybe more or less going forward, we return in a way to the police academy setting, and it's a nice return because then we see a number of familiar faces, plus a number of new people that we meet along the way as well. So it's a nice thing. And when I say familiar faces, sometimes people or characters that we see from earlier films return, but then they return in a different type of setup. So I mentioned, say, for example, Fackler and what he and his wife were in, say, the first film versus what happens in the third film, as an example, or say part 2 to part 3, the characters of Zed and Sweet Chuck, etc. So there's all these great little twists and turns that make it, I think, for a really fun time, and everyone is part of this sort of group dynamic. And I'm speaking about this too because Police Academy, I remember too as a kid, Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol. I remember when those commercials and trailers came up for the film. Around the late 80s. I was so excited for this film, and my mom took me as a little kid to see it in the theater when it opened, so it was really exciting. Cop, Citizens on Patrol, Citizens on Patrol, yes. And I remember the theme song, we're Citizens on Patrol. I thought that was the coolest song ever as a kid growing up. And then you go into the later films, part 5, Assignment Miami Beach, which I also saw in the theater too, by the way, and then part 6 too, City Under Siege, and then Mission to Moscow. Mission to Moscow is, City Under Siege is so great. I know that maybe for some people, maybe the later films might not be as strong as, say, the earlier films. But I thought that they each have their own strengths. For example, City Under Siege 6 has a great plot. It has a really, really great plot that's filled with a lot of layers of intrigue that arguably we had not seen the likes of in, say, the past films. And not to take anything away from the greatness that were the plots of the past films, mind you, but still there's something of this level of, say, corruption and intrigue that's really fascinating in part 6. And then part 7, the final film, we get this real interesting group dynamic, especially how they treat certain characters that might have been, say, quote-unquote villains or antagonists in the past films. I'm speaking, of course, of the iconic character Harris. G.W. Bailey character, and then we see how, for example, his character has a type of how should I put it, a really almost heartwarming recalibration of sorts, as well as seeing some, not all, of course, but we get many of the our old friends returning for one last hurrah, as it were, in Mission to Moscow. And then not only do we see Lassard and company, but we also see the likes of people like, say, Christopher Lee as well. So, in a very interesting Christopher Lee showing. So, there is a lot of fun to be had, all the way down to, say, the latter part of this particular series, City Under Siege and Mission to Moscow. And Assignment Miami Beach Part 5, I must say, as I say, I saw it in the theater. It has one of the, I think it's one of the funniest jokes in cinema that involves the word dork. D-O-R-K, dork. It's one of the funniest jokes. It's just, I think about it now. I'm smiling and, on the inside and the outside, because it's so great. So there's that, and I spoke a little bit about some of the characters here. I mean, the characters are just so memorable and worthwhile, and just so full of life, and they have their own little, as I say, quirks, like Tackleberry and Harris and Mauser and Proctor and of course Mahoney and Jones and Hightower and the like. And of course there's some characters that we see maybe in just one film and never again, like Barbara or George Martin in the first film, or the like. And so, but it's one of the nice things about the films is that along with the great jokes, we get the kind of every time it's like we're returning to meet old friends, like reunions. It's always like a reunion, and everyone has this a devotion towards Lassard, and so that has that great sense of family, which is really quite pleasant and nice, as well as the idea of action, just having a good time. I'm trying to be as vague as possible because I don't want to spoil a lot of the jokes, or I don't want to spoil any of the jokes here in case you haven't seen it. It's not for everyone. I mean, comedy is one of the things that I think translates the hardest in terms of cross generations and the passage of time. So I totally get that. But for me, as a child of the 80s, this was one of the great times, and it still is one of the great times that I have. As I say, just some of the jokes here, or a lot of the jokes, are still, to my eyes, out of this world and so delightful, and so great. There's a particular scene I remember. Actually, let me just take it a step back to. So as I said, I was growing up in the 80s, and before Citizens on Patrol, Police Academy, before Citizens on Patrol was released in theaters, I had known obviously only the first three films, 1, 2, and 3. In that time, I had grown to watch a lot, part 2 and part 3. Not so much 1 until a little bit later, again during my growing up during this time. But when I saw, in other words, I saw them out of sequence, and I saw the first film, Police Academy, on VHS a little bit later, and I was actually really amazed at how much it was in keeping in the spirit of the type of antics and comic hijinks that we had seen in parts 2 and 3. But it also had its own tenor, and it felt like it was almost separate from the rest of the films in the way that, say, we had a lot of characters that we meet there, Kim Cattrall character, etc., that we never see again in some of the films, or we have a lot of a kind of setup that has a almost maybe a type of serious tone to it, perhaps, while at the same time keeping true to the spirit of what we would see in later films in the Police Academy series. So in other words, watching the first film was almost like a real eye-opener to me, and it struck me so much. And there's a really, I remember as a kid, and my friends were watching, we would just be just all the time, we would just laugh out loud, like laughing so hard to the point of tears, with in particular a moment in that film involving how should I put it, a horse and a hat, let me put it that way. So it was it was it was a really really interesting time indeed. So the films, Police Academy, I am hoping maybe one day I can speak more specifically about these films. And maybe on that occasion we can talk about specific plot details and specific characters. I'd love also the opportunity maybe one day to sort of rank my favorite characters in the Police Academy series, because there's so many to choose from. Um, you know, I think maybe without giving too much away, I think one of the greatest characters in Police Academy history, and in fact, one of the greatest characters, I think, or one of the most memorable characters in 80s comedy, American 80s comedy history, I think is the character of Proctor. Proctor is, I think, to me, in many ways, the type of embodiment of what Police Academy is. I mean, Proctor is many things to many people. He is a type of hero, he's a villain, he is a type of sidekick, or he's a type of buffoon, but he's always also very earnest, and he really believes what it is he's doing, even if it leads to some really, really funny and very absurd situations. But he's always there, and he's always reliable. And so I always like to think, in my own viewpoint. I mean, people I think gravitate also to other great characters like Mahoney or Tackleberry, of course, Jones, of course, Hightower, great characters, of course. But there's some, and or Harris and Mauser, of course. You know. Again, I don't want to give too much away, but here's my Mauser impression in case anyone's interested. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh oh. All right, so that's my Mauser impression. So anyway, but I was saying, yes, for me, it's the character of Proctor that I think is so much a lot of the spirit of Police Academy. But of course, that's not to say that he's the only one there. There's all the characters that add, like Callahan and Lassard, etc. They add so much to the spirit of celebration and fun and good times at the movies, which is what these films are. These are good times at the movies. They might not be for everyone, but that's okay. But for those for whom these films are a lot of fun, they are truly a lot of fun indeed. So these are the films I wanted to speak very briefly about today. They are the films in this series from the 80s leading on into the 90s, but primarily in the 80s, these works which are the films of Police Academy. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.